So you've worked in at least three different career worlds that I know of. Maybe we'll discover some other ones. You've worked being a waiter. Then
Yeah.
you've been in a band, maybe
Yeah.
several bands. Then I guess maybe well you've been in the tech world, and in the tech world, I mean you've done a couple of things, but we'll just say in the tech world. We'll simplify it.
Okay.
And now, okay, so when you went from like uh what was it, your vegan muffletta sandwich and your green smoothie, like serving that stuff
Uh-huh.
to like in the tech world, whether you're doing like whatever you want to call it, evangelizing developer tech stuff, lightboarding, or we should talk about your CSM job for a little bit. You just kind of mentioned that in passing. That'd be fascinating to hear. Like, so you went into the corporate world after all of
Y-
this, and
Yeah.
like now that you've been in the corporate world for a while, what are like some things that you think us people who've grown up in the corporate world, like we don't even realize are happening? Like I was thinking of this because you mentioned in one talk you had to ask someone, what is Q2? And then even better, you made this comment. You're like, it seems kind of arbitrary that you would divide things into quarters. So like what are some other things that like you still encounter them in the corporate world and you're like, that's weird. Like, how did that decision come about? Like, it's kind of like driving on the right side of the road. Like, okay, I guess
Well,
it's a 50-50 choice between the two.
I think it's weird how everyone just offers up their time to everyone else at the drop of a hat. Here's my calendar. Book anytime you want. If you
Uh-huh.
ping me, I'm going to respond to you immediately. Like the I honestly, I think it there's like a showmanship around being busy that actually makes you way less productive.
Huh. That's an interesting choice. Well, tell me more about that because that is like I think in the what year is this? The past 10 years, there's like all these self help books that have come out that are really about this. I don't know how you think about it, but this like it's almost like the neuroses of being busy at work and how you should like cut that shit out and focus on things. So like what is I don't know what's your perspective on that? Why is that weird? Like what is the better way
Well,
to be?
I guess like from a human perspective, it makes sense. Like you want to demonstrate that you're present, and especially in a remote working situation,
Mm,
it's like somehow your way to prove that you're working or you're by your computer and available. But from like a realistic perspective, like as someone who's learned a lot and like gotten deep on a lot of tech concepts, I don't know how people can get deep on stuff and be so available at the same time. Like
yeah,
for
yeah.
me, every ping is an interruption. It takes me somewhere else. It's hard to find focus again, if I even can find focus again. And so it's surprising to me how many people seem to operate that way. And maybe they're good at it, and I just it's me. I don't understand. I can't context switch like that.
Mm,
But the context switching, not only is it acceptable, but it's encouraged, is a surprise to me.
yeah. Do you think it works? I mean, maybe not at an individual level, but let's say like at a group level, that if you have an organization working in that, people used to say multitasking, but working
Uh
in that
huh.
kind of like fast switching, always being available and busy, like busy. We should explore that word a little bit, but
Yeah,
always having back to back meetings. Like,
yeah.
do you think in aggregate that works, or like what, or is
Well, I
neutral?
think there are a couple things. One is, let's be clear, I'm in a marketing org, so maybe not as many people are doing the kind of deep work that I feel like needs to be done. And so maybe in marketing, there's different objectives that I don't clearly understand that lend themselves more to context switching. Like events planning, maybe you need to coordinate among lots of
Mm.
people, and that's the big thing more than actually sitting down and writing a blog post or whatever. I lost my train of thought. So so it could be that it's marketing. And it could be, I think it's important to be like, what is the goal of what someone's trying to do? If
Mm.
you're trying to solve a problem, if you're trying to write software, if you're trying to understand complex concepts, communicate those complex concepts, I don't know if it's me personally or if it's the world, but I don't see how being so available is lends itself to doing well at those types of things.
Right. Well. So you create a tremendous amount of content. You are of course Whitney Lee. We co-workers for quite some time, friends now, I believe. And this that's
Yes.
that's that's one of the things I wanted to ask you about is.
Are we friends? Yes, we're friends.
That's right. That's right.
I'll get us some bracelets, some matching bracelets.
Oh, that's nice. My both of my daughters are very into the bracelets nowadays.
Okay.
They wear more bracelets than like a 45-year-old divorced man does, which is impressive. And
Coach just sent me a note that said, "Are we friends? Check one."
That's right.
Yes or no.
You can unfold it. So you're kind of answering one question I wanted to have, or I had, which is like, you obviously have figured out a way to like cut off nonsense inputs so that you just focus on like the work product that you're making, the stuff that you're doing. And like, so how do you do that? Like, are there like techniques that you have, or is it just like, yeah, you just don't respond? I mean, like, like when you reflect about like, I need to cut off this nonsense coming at you.
Mm-hmm.
What do you do?
There are lots of things. Uh, it's all a lot of boundary setting is one thing. A lot of like when you have tech communications or corporate communications, do you truly expect everyone to be immediately available? When they don't get back to you right away, do you mind or care? Like, honestly, I think good for them. They're busy and doing something important, you know?
Yeah.
And really, if someone does mind or care, that's not a person I really want to be working with anyway. So I think humans naturally imitate one another. And if I set an expectation that I'm going to respond several hours or a day later, then other people will respond to me in kind. That's how they'll start communicating with me on that slower pace. And B, I haven't had anyone mind. And of course, I'm aware that of what my priorities are right now. And if it is something that's like, if I'm booking a show, it is nice when people respond right away. I still respect when they don't, but I prioritize the communication that matters to me too.
So there's a little bit of managing you do in your
Yeah.
day-to-day work nowadays, kind of managing because you're not a big enough deal yet to have a show booker or a producer. You got to do all that back end of stuff yourself. Every now and then I imagine
Yeah.
you have to like order stickers, things like that, right? And so like, is there a different way you operate? Let's say let's make the distinction of like, what would you call it? There's stage and backstage. I think there's some other term for that, but like there's on air and off air. And like,
Uh-huh.
how different do you think those two personalities are?
Oh, they're the same. I think they're pretty damn the same.
Yeah.
Um, I mean, off air, of course, is quieter. Maybe doesn't smile alone so much at my house. But off air, Whitney's kind and just quiet. I mean, I live alone with my cat. I talk to my cat. So I guess on air Whitney is real jabbery, a lot more talkative maybe than off air Whitney,
Right,
who's
right.
more observant. When I'm on air, I'm aware that I'm leading somehow, or I'm aware of what my role is. If I'm a guest, I'm aware of letting someone else lead, and of course, like in this situation,
I see.
and doing my role well. So in an on air situation, I have a role to fill. I'm aware of that role, and I'm doing it. And usually, it's me who's hosting, and therefore, I'm very much a leader and the one making sure things are interesting. And off air, I don't have any of those pressures. I'm just doing. But my mind is the same.
So there, see, we can very quickly get into gazing at our own navels collectively on this. But this, you brought up an interesting thing that like I don't really, I haven't thought about in a long time, but I used to think about a lot, which is if you do a lot of like conference talks, podcast videos, whatever you call all this kind of stuff, you were talking about this, but you start to build up this like podcast voice and kind of
Yeah.
like podcast conversation style. And
Uh-huh.
I don't know if this ever happened, but I feel like every now and then I would have to catch myself and be like, "Oh, I'm not recording a podcast. I'm having dinner with my wife." And like so like have you noticed like are you aware of like shifting your conversational stuff to these different like modes?
I Well, I don't know if this is a chicken or the egg thing. I was a very, very shy child. So all of my these sorts of communications are learned. They
Mm,
came with effort and with reading books about how it works and such. So my son says that makes me a robot. He teases me. But I'm benevolent. I use it for good. Whitney the benevolent robot. So when I'm having a conversation with a friend, I similarly think in terms of like, okay, have I asked enough questions to answered questions? Like, what am I being a good listener? Like, I do, and it's become second nature to your point about being a podcast host at the dinner table. Um, so but I don't think that's a bad thing to bring podcast host Whitney into a conversation,
mm.
into a personal conversation. My voice doesn't change. Maybe during a podcast, you have to be a little interrupty in a way I would never do in real life.
Yeah.
So that hasn't bubbled over into real life. But the deliberateness of conversation, it has always been a part of how I learned not to be shy.
Yeah. I mean, there's almost the I mean, I have a similar experience too, where I think, well, I shouldn't hesitate. I know this is the fact, unless my memory has been rewritten for me and I didn't know it. But I remember when I was a late teenager, in the later lives of my teenage years, I read a lot of like communication books, like how people talk and stuff, because I think I was just like, I don't
Yeah.
know how people talk, and so
Uh-huh.
there's almost like that kind of engineered aspect to
Yeah.
conversation stuff, which I don't know, it can be a little trying sometimes to be in a conversation and like be managing myself working at it. Like
Yeah.
now I've got to wait and wait. And now I ask this question. Oh, and I should be like, oh, how about tell me more about that? Like, I don't know. But
I do. I feel it the most when I go to conferences and then am thrown into a dinner situation where nobody really knows anyone else at the
oh,
dinner. And then there's a power vacuum that I'll often try to fill, and I'll be podcast host Whitney at that dinner table and ask a question that different people can answer and be in control of who's speaking when and that sort of thing, just because the table needs it. But then I don't want to do another dinner the whole like for weeks after that, because it's not it's enjoyable in the moment, but not something I like to repeat very often.
yeah. Well, so yeah, ugh, the dinners. I've
That
had.
Oh, to answer your question from earlier, being like server Whitney and also wedding photography was my biggest old career, and you didn't mention that one, so I'm
Oh,
just gonna
that's true.
mention it
That's true.
now. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. I did, but like from being that old, like server Whitney, like tour de band Whitney, going to tech conferences and the lavish dinners y'all have every night, that is wild to me.
Right.
Wild, yes. Seeing just like the scale of money is so different overall.
Yeah,
And
yeah,
then the
yeah.
scale of free stuff is also way higher, and y'all don't need the free stuff.
No. I don't know if you've
Yeah.
gotten to this point, but like nowadays, like I just don't really take any free stuff
Oh no, goodness
unless
no.
it's like, you always need wires and cables. So those are
Yeah.
nice. But other than that, like I don't need more stuff.
Yeah.
What so yes, wedding photography. We'll have to
Hmm.
get to that. That's I feel like there's all sorts of things to talk about in that area. But like that's another area, like with all the stuff you've done, like you've got I'm always curious what people's perspective on stuff that I've been simmering in a long time is. And you're making me wonder, like, so when you go to those, so I ask you like corporate world stuff, but like what have you discovered about like the not the hidden, but the not so much seen world of tech? Like you go to a conference, right? There's like the
Hmm.
hallway con. You end up going to
Hmm.
dinner with these tech people, and like I don't know. I mean, I feel like most tech people are kind of weird. like at least a lot of them that we would encounter. And so like what like how have you like learned them? Like if you were like an anthropologist and you were like,
Uh-huh.
I've been sent to study the tech world. Like what are some things that you would, or let's put it this way. Let's say you're talking with some of your as I would call them, civilian friends, non-tech people.
Uh-huh.
Like how would you explain what's going on in this world? Like how would you say like, here's how these people are?
Well, the first order of business in my archaeological job is to simply learn the language. Like there's a wild amount of jargon and acronyms in it. And when I first got the job at VMware, it became my full-time job to be in the public talking about tech. And I made flashcards of all of the terms in the Kubernetes glossary. I went to the Kubernetes documentation, there's a glossary, and made a flashcard. So there's no Kubernetes concept that can come up without me at least having some idea of what it is.
Right.
So just, it's a different language. And then once you can speak the language, then, well, even though we're talking about tech, even though we're talking about complex concepts, there's a universal feeling of wanting to be seen and understood. So then step 2 is take your own knowledge and your own ego out of it and seek to understand what someone's knowledge is.
Mm-hmm.
Which is a lot of what you do too, I think, in your podcast and your interviewing experience. And so it's like, if I don't, like, I'm going to ask you lots and lots of questions. It's going to be a one-sided conversation where you, the experts, what are you, these people, that person is talking. And I'm going to, and anything you say that I don't understand, I'm going to ask you more about. And instead of that making me seem like I don't know anything, which a lot of people are afraid to do because they don't want to expose their own gaps in knowledge, it really makes that other person feel like an expert and good and seen and understood. And I think both parties win. Does that answer the question?
Yeah. I mean, I think if the maybe a result of that is like, they've got this language and topics the tech people talk about, but
Uh-huh.
it's pretty much the same as anyone else, right? Like
Yeah.
they want to talk about computers because
Uh-huh.
that's what they know, and like,
Uh-huh.
and then also like they, once you talk about stuff they're interested in, they'll talk with you.
Yeah, and just accept, I mean, that maybe their social skills aren't what yours are. They're exactly what mine used to be, so I understand what it feels like. And they might not be good at asking you questions, and that's okay. Just don't sometimes like I'm telling you, I am a robot, and I'll go into a conversation understanding this conversation has nothing to do with me. I'm not going to try to talk about my experiences. I'm not going to try to interject. If they ask me, I'm an open book. I do like talking about myself like everyone, but I'm going to make this conversation about having them talk about themselves.
Right.
And
Yeah,
make it fun for me. Yeah.
You know, that's a good technique I learned from my own anxieties a while ago. Is if you're asking other people questions, you don't have to talk. You can.
I'm totally insecure about my knowledge, so therefore I'm going to ask a ton of questions. It's counterintuitive, but it works. Yeah.
Yeah. So let's say when was the first time you like started doing Kubernetes stuff? Was that 2019 or 2020? Like what was the date?
I learned the basic concepts of what Kubernetes is in October of 2019.
Okay.
I just graduated a boot camp and I was interviewing for a job to be a cloud developer at IBM. And I learned about Kubernetes in preparation for that job interview.
Okay. So it's been 4.5 years, whatever, right? Which is a long time in I mean back then Istio included Knative, if I remember, which was and maybe even like Knative was still still controlled by Google. Like things have changed.
Build spun out to be Tecton. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Okay. So you've seen a lot of it, and like, so I'm curious, like from the beginning, if you were to compare, let's anthropomorphize it. Like if you were to compare what Kubernetes wanted in 2019 to what Kubernetes wants now, like how does it compare? Has it changed? Is it different? Like what? How has it changed as it's gotten older?
Two things. One is you're giving way too much credit to 2019, Whitney, because I watched some videos about what it is and was able and made flashcards again and was able to regurgitate the knowledge to my interviewer. But like having an understanding of even what they meant by nodes and VMs and what Linux is and like all of the concepts, even the problem it's solving wasn't a problem I ever felt before.
Mm.
My coding boot camp was for full stack web development. So my world of understanding Kubernetes started out very small and then I built on that. But that said, in my early career in doing Kubernetes stuff, we're very focused on lower level details and how to get it installed. And it mattered what environment you were in and what install tool you were using. And it's air gapped and using a bastion node and all of this stuff in a way that has mostly been abstracted away now, where there are managed versions of Kubernetes in the cloud, or even the tools you use are more like you use Cluster API or Crossplane now,
Hmm.
even in an air gapped environment, and it's completely automated and it's not a problem that people need to solve anymore. So the abstractions are being built for sure. In my short time in tech, I can see it moving up the abstraction level.
And so maybe there's more like I don't know like how both you and like the Kubernetes community, like how do they frame this idea? The way I would put what you're saying is you've got this like core of like it's this paradox of complexity and simplicity in that it doesn't do that much. It doesn't do as much as you think it would, but it's also like everyone's always like, "Ooh, scary," right?
Kubernetes doesn't do as much
Yeah.
as you think it would.
Well, I mean, there's the core of it, and you layer on all this other stuff to
Yeah.
do things for you, right? So,
Okay.
like, just the basic of and you are much more an expert than I am, but the basics of what it does versus what people have talked about over the years
Yeah.
are different, right? Like there's
Yeah.
like the little, I got containers and I put them on machines and I make sure they have a good configuration and I kind of sort of manage their ability to talk to each other.
Yeah.
And then I specify a schema for making an what I would call what Kubernetes calls an API. And I don't know, there's a few other things, but it's like it doesn't do everything else that an IaaS layer does or whatever, as far as I can
So
tell.
at its core, I think of Kubernetes like it knows your desired state. You have a way to tell it your desired state, and then its job is to do synchronization loops and keep that desired state in tune with actual state. And so out of the box, it does that with very basic things with your pods and services and whatever. And then these extensions that you're talking about, the hundreds of tools in the CNCF ecosystem, they're basically all leveraging that synchronization loop, that
Right.
opportunity to say we have a desired state and we want an actual state to be continuously reconciled. And that's my like super simplistic breakdown of what Kubernetes is. And then those hundreds of tools can be in the observability space, it could be in the security space, they could be in the infrastructure space. You can manage stuff completely outside of Kubernetes now, like I kind of briefly mentioned before with Cluster API and Crossplane. Um, so there's wild complexity on top of what you can do with that simple idea.
And like so like I guess people kind of still do this, but I don't think they do it so much. It used to be a favorite thing to do to put that CNCF landscape up and be like, "Ooh, scary," right?
Uh-huh.
Like look at all that, and like, is that
I have an image I made where I drew a bowl of spaghetti on top of it and like had noodles wrapped around different. Yeah.
exactly. So like, what's the take on the moment with that idea? Because I mean, it seems like there's multiple ways it could go. I love asking questions and then telling you how I would answer it. But like, on the one hand, like I went to a hot pot buffet for the first time a while ago, and there's a
Uh-huh.
lot of options, right? And
Uh-huh.
that could be overwhelming or it could be
Yeah.
great. And so like, what do people like the CNCF hot pot bar? Or like what's the take on it nowadays?
You hear the term tool fatigue thrown around quite a bit. And this idea of tool fatigue and like when I first started at IBM, people kept saying shift left, and I was like, what the hell are they talking about? I had no idea. Shift
Right.
left doesn't imply anything to an outsider. But the idea was that, okay, now with Kubernetes in the picture, we can ask app teams to have more control over how their application is deployed, and we can put more of that onto them. But
Mm.
then as that situation has grown more and more complex, now we're like, wait, no, we don't want our app teams to do that. We want them to write the logic and the application logic, and we want to provide support for them to be able to do what we want. So there's a push with all of those bajillion tools, with all those bajillion like things to worry about. We want to decide those things at an organizational level, and then have ways for our platform. That's called a platform. We're dancing around at an organizational level with platform engineers. And then have our application teams be able to access what they need in an abstracted and self-service way.
Hmm.
But what I'm leaving out of the picture, there's also the platform engineers themselves shouldn't be the ones necessarily, depending on the size of the org, to be experts in all the different tools. That's still asking too much of one persona, of one team. So we have, on one side, we have experts who are expert in their particular thing, and that expert can work together with the platform engineer to design the capability, and then the platform engineer's job is actually the interfaces to bring the capability to the application developer.
Right. Classic platform layering.
Classic
Yes.
platform.
And like, so when you're out there metaphorically or literally talking with people like that, well, I mean, how real is that vision? like how often are people putting in like not only that layering, but one of kind of some of the assumptions behind it. Like one of the assumptions is, and in my current and your previous job when we were colleagues, like one of the, we would state it, but so to speak, unstated assumption or presumptions, sort of like premises, was that developers just want to write code, and of course what that means is application developers. And I feel like that's maybe like half true, because I've known a lot of application developers, and they also like not writing code. Like they also like writing infrastructure stuff and doing other things. So like I don't know, like what do you, when you're talking with people, how true is this idea that application developers only want to write code and they don't want to write YAML and things like that?
I think the premises, instead of application developers want to write code, is everyone in tech enjoys efficiency. We don't want to feel like our time is being wasted.
Right.
I think that's a good premise that kind of is the same thing, but also accounts for the fact that different people want to do different things. Someone on an application team who cares more about infrastructure, I have a couple things to say about that person. One is maybe they should be in the DevOps or the platform team. Like there's no rule that says they shouldn't be on that application team.
Yeah.
But also the second thing is, any good platform, you're making your capabilities for required and undifferentiated and broadly used capability, like use cases. And if you have someone on your team that has a specific infrastructure vision for your particular application that's different from what your platform is offering, I think it's good to have a way that for them to be able to do that if it's useful. So I think a platform should be optional.
Yeah, I like your idea of like everyone likes not wasting their time or spending their time efficiently, to put it in a positive way. All right. Well, so I did leave it out and you mentioned it, but like how do you like run a successful wedding photography business? Because it seems like most anyone can just be like, I'll come take pictures, and then you could like put up a website, like how do you like start that from nothing?
Well, it's not unlike software. Like when I was booking a client, first of all, for the most part, no one's ever been married before, so they don't know what they're looking for in a wedding photographer.
And I guess if you're on your second or third marriage, you're kind of like, nah, we'll just get George to take the pictures.
Courthouse is fine. Yeah. Disposable camera, that'll do. And so therefore, just like with software, you're educating about what the problems are and what you're doing about those problems. So then when they go talk to a couple other wedding photographers, then they know what they're looking for too, and they know that you're doing a good job caring for it. So you're educating as part of selling, just like with software. You're like, here are your problems and here's how I'm going to fix them.
Yeah, yeah.
And then there's a lot of identifying stakeholders. There's managing expectations. There's working together with the client to come up with a schedule for the wedding day that's going to set me up for success. That gives me all the time I need to take the right photos. I a few times got in trouble because I made an assumption that I didn't even realize was an assumption. So then I started adding questions to try to root out assumptions, because they'll be like, you didn't get a photo of this antique brooch that was part of my bouquet, but it was buried underneath the bouquet where, like I just didn't see it there. It was hidden.
Right.
And so now it's like, is there any detail I might not be able to see that I should be able to get a picture of? More and more, my questionnaires and all the process I went through was just about covering my ass than it was about.
I think they call it customer service.
But I honestly see that in software too. It's just like, oh, this is coming from a place of, you've gotten in trouble in this area before, so now you're doing what you can to not do that.
Yeah, no, that's interesting. It's the question of like what, and I like the way you put it, because if you put it this generic way, it's someone has to know you're asking this question, but it's the what am I not asking you?
Yeah.
Right.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And also with weddings, for me, it's the 400th wedding I'm photographed. For you, it's the most important day of your life. And so I need to be aware of this difference of feeling and make sure I'm doing what I need to do to make you also feel like I feel like it's a very important day. But I see that with software too. Yeah. Like for you, this is a huge deal. For me, this is just another day at the office.
So like how do you suss out the style of like, well, I don't know. I mean, tell me if this is even an option, but I feel like sometimes the wedding photographer can just be like all over the place and just like really getting in there, versus like other times maybe you want them to be a little more discreet. Like are those different options? Like what's the gradient of like how in your face and in front of other people do you want me to be?
It's been that one, I don't remember if I was just like paying attention to people and what's important, or whether I don't remember whether I asked them directly. What I do remember is that I was aware of how I needed to build trust. And part of that was with education, but then also my packages would include like a free engagement session. So I had time to spend with them and understand their personalities and photographic preferences, and like what successful poses I could do with them. And in general, just give them the experience of like, they trust me to boss them around in a posing perspective. And then they see that they like the result. So that on the wedding day, we're not going through that trust circle. I've already built the trust, and then now I can leverage it at a more important time.
Oh, I see. So you take pictures of them already. So
yeah, and
like a
session.
simulation.
I'm sorry, I'm using wedding photography jargon now.
Right.
The tables have turned.
Yes.
So an engagement session is a photography session that happens before the wedding day in nice street clothes, and we just go around town and take nice photos of the couple together.
All right. Well, what do you think is like the some of the best, like, I don't know what you'd call it, but like scenery or backgrounds that you've done? Like, what are ones you're like, oh yeah, that one was great. That was nice, versus ones that were not so nice?
That was another thing where I would manage expectations and say, here are some photos I've done in nature. Here are some different types of nature. Here are some photos I've done in the city. Like, do you want quirky graffiti backgrounds, or do you want more like the Texas State Capitol or whatever? Do you want more classic UT campus backgrounds? And get a feel for what they want. My favorite, and I would always give this option, like, oh, or you could just let me do whatever I'm feeling. And sometimes people would do that. And that was, of course, my favorite, because then I could do I would always get some classic stuff in there. Again, always covering my ass. That was a big thing by the end. But being able to do the super weird, quirky stuff where I was like laying on the ground and shooting through a railing at them, and they were really small in the frame. And we'll supplement the podcast with some images. But yeah,
Right,
that sort
right,
of
right.
thing.
We
Uh-huh.
yeah. What's your take on like, you know? See, I told
As
you,
promised.
the dog.
Yeah.
Junebug, come over here. Come on. So like, what is so when you're taking a photo, it doesn't have to be wedding photography. Like, what's your aesthetic machine for like framing things? And by framing, I mean, I don't know photography terms. I know there's composition, like
Uh-huh.
where you place things, but I mean framing, like you were just saying, like, ooh, I'm going to be on one side of a chain link fence, and you're going to be
Yeah.
able to see the chain link fence to like highlight something.
Yep.
Like it seems like if you do that for all photos, it starts to become not good. But
Yeah.
sometimes it's good. So like, when do you decide to do that or not?
It's a matter of time. So back to managing expectations for like the wedding day schedule. So an engagement session's nice because there's plenty of time. All I'm doing is taking portraits for an hour, hour and a half. And so I'm very deliberate. I'm going to get of just their heads. I'm going to get full body. I'll probably get one from the back where they're looking over their shoulder. Like I got to get all the checklists to feel like they have what they need
A
for whatever
list.
invitation or whatever. It's a
Yeah.
mental checklist, but yes. And then once I have my bases covered, that frees me up to do the weird stuff through a fence and through
I see.
uh
I mean,
yeah.
but like in your own photography, like
Mm-hmm.
when do you decide to do that? Like
Well,
when do you use that if you're like taking photos on your own, or do you
I
not?
I literally I have like a trauma response when I think about wedding photography. I did it too much for too long, and I haven't touched my camera in a decade. It's up in the attic, collecting dust.
Huh.
But back when I did it, those weird artsy shots, that those were the ones that brought me fulfillment. Like the nice ones of the of 3/4 link were ones I've taken like literally thousands of times. So I knew I could do that. And that's part of why I didn't like wedding photography. I really, really didn't like it at the end because I wasn't growing. Like I knew how to
Mm.
do exactly this thing over and over and over and over again with different characters and maybe slightly different preferences, but it was always basically the same.
Do you think that mm, need for new things or growing or learning or novelty? Do you think everyone's like that? Like, do you think people get frustrated in life if they're doing the same thing over and over again, or the same type of thing over and over again?
Um, well, I mean, I'll say I think some people find security in doing the same thing over and over again instead of boredom, and that's okay. And also, I'll say maybe doing something over and over again in your work life frees you up to do adventurous things in your personal life.
All right, right.
Yeah.
Yeah, so you can just like uh that is an interesting thing I think about every now and then is how well, one, I have to figure out what it is I want to do to as an alternative, but how can I just do the minimum amount of work for the maximum amount of resource that I get in return, whether that's
Aren't we
time or
all doing
money.
that? Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. I guess so. Like, uh, it does seem like it does seem like maybe not enough people think like the companies they work for. Where like I always think a company's job, a commercial company's job, is to do the
Mhm.
minimal amount of work for the maximal amount of profit, right?
Mhm.
Whereas like
Yeah.
as an individual worker, that's almost taboo to do that. Like to do
Uh-huh.
to do the minimum for the maximal. I don't know. It's kind of like that busy thing we were talking about a while ago. Is you can't appear
Yeah.
it can't appear that things are effortless for you because then people
Uh-huh.
think you're not working.
Yeah. But how much like if you're I think it's sad if we're judging each other about how much you're working based on how much you're available. And
Mm.
and I'll say too, I love reading those sorts of books that are like, here's how to like make your life better. I guess what are they called? Self-help
There
books?
you go.
Yeah.
Make
There's
your
one
life
called
better.
yeah. Self-help implies that you need help, and I don't, I don't feel like I need help. I just like making it better.
Uh-huh.
So, or even being deliberate about the choices I'm making. I might not choose to do what's in the book, but I like knowing the mechanics of how things work, even in a behavioral level. But anyway, the one I'm thinking of a book called Rest, and I believe the subtitle is oh well, I'm gonna get it wrong. How to I don't know. But it makes a real case for you can, especially if your job is to generate ideas, you can be a lot more effective. You can work smarter and better if you let yourself rest enough. And like part of your day should be daydreaming, like how important daydreaming is in the generation of new ideas. So you can go on a walk and an uninterrupted walk away from Slack and call it work, because if your idea is to generate, if you're getting paid to generate ideas, that you're creating the perfect environment for yourself to generate ideas.
Yeah, yeah. Well, how do you find what's your routines for idea generation? Like what's the context you need to have yourself in? Like how do you prep yourself for it? How do you like capture the ideas? How does the machine work?
That's a great question. I think it. So I do like daydreaming time, and I have sometimes I'll get a 0 day. I get very excited about a 0 day, and that's a day when I don't have any social obligations. Like my calendar is just empty. Like yes, a 0 day.
And
And I
you
think
actually call it a 0 day? You
I
didn't just
do. Uh-huh.
okay. Yeah.
Yeah. I have and sometimes when I get close to having a 0 day, my friends will know. They're like, "Hey, do you want to go do this?" I'm like, "Sorry, it's a 0 day. I'm not going to mess it up." It's, um then but so having space is one thing to be able to let your mind wander. And I do go on a daily walk after work during usually later in the day. In Texas, it's hot right now, so I
Yeah.
have to change it around. But another thing is I journal every day. So I reflect on how the day's been, or I reflect about what my priorities are at the moment. And a lot of times when I sit down to journal, sometimes I just pump it out and like write it in 10 minutes and I'm done. But sometimes I get into like daydreamy mode and start to really think about what am I doing with my life? How did I get here? What do I want? I don't know. But really,
Uh-huh.
like, no, I have this goal I need to achieve, and how am I going to get there? But like, okay, I do a thing that's overwhelming to me, but I've come up with a system where I learn all of the tools in the CNCF regarding one specific thing over a 2 or 3 month period. So I did it earlier this year. I did it around Kubernetes security. I'm currently doing it around Kubernetes observability tools. In each case, there are 20 or 30 tools I'm learning, and I'm understanding how they all work together for it to make a comprehensive solution. And I am able to do that because I do enlightening episodes about each tool. I make flashcards about those episodes. Then I host a You Choose show where we actually pit the tools against each other. And then I'm learning them again there in that context. And then from there, I make it into a conference talk about how it all works together. But all of that to say, as part of, I keep talking about these flashcards. As part of the flashcards, the Anki deck I use, it gives me a reason to lightly think about all these same things every day. For an hour a day, I study my flashcards. And so therefore, these same concepts that I'm trying to learn are coming up over and over and over again each day. So at the beginning, they're uncomfortable. I have to struggle to answer the question on the card. I don't really understand how it all works. As I think of questions, I find experts to ask of the questions, and sometimes in a public way, I'll design a show around it. And then it does start to all fall into place until I get a really good mental model around how things work, and I can dance around it and play in it. And it all culminates in a KubeCon talk, a Choose Your Own Adventure KubeCon talk that I do alongside Victor Farsick, where I talk about the tools in relation to one another.
And
So all
there's
that,
like 2 or 3 of those a year, right? The
yeah,
like
two
KubeCons?
two a year. There's no
Yeah.
way I could do three. It's a challenging thing. Yeah. Um, I give a lot of myself to those.
Yeah. Like what I mean a lot of what you're talking about there, well, some of what you're talking about there is one like routine and habits.
Yep.
But then two, like I don't know if it's famous or infamous, but at least in my own head, I'm known for complaining about like I'm bad at I don't have the habit of forming habits, so to
Uh,
speak. And so like it makes me when I have this kind of discussion with people, including just talking to myself, you need to find like a motivation, right? And like what like you have the motivation of a date, like a
Uh-huh.
deadline in there, but
Yeah.
like what's like motivating you to do all of this? Because that's a lot of work.
And I got laid off a month ago and I'm still doing all these shows because I have that KubeCon talk coming up. So I haven't even like taken time off really, even though I'm not no longer employed. But I basically have made obligations to my co-presenter, Victor Farsick, and the community with the You Choose. Like there's a schedule
Yeah.
and it's already written and I'm going to do what I said I would do. So definitely that. But then why do I agree to do the next one? That's a great question. And then You Choose ended.
You chose to end.
No, I think it's a couple of things. One is in my previous life as a wedding photographer, I was not learning and growing at all. I mean, there is certainly a little bit, but like not very much. And now that I've like rediscovered my intelligence and rediscovered what I'm capable of, it's very exciting to be able to flex it. So I think that's part of it.
Yeah. Yeah, there's a talk on learning that one of the DevOps world people, Sasha, has given. I've seen her give it 2 times, and she she raises this point of like it's all about like motivating yourself to learn, more or
Uh-huh.
less, right? And one of the points she makes that I think about a lot is a lot of people like they complain about how tedious it is to learn, or they're bored with it, or like they would rather like be doing something else. And she was like, but here's a test. Like just sit down on a chair or a couch for like and try to sit there for 5 minutes doing nothing. And I bet you'll go insane. Right. Like you need something to do. And so like
Yeah.
you can find this like raw energy
Mm-hmm.
to do the flashcards or to like, do this or do that. But I don't know. I haven't connected those rusty wires together where I can have my rational mind drive my like, you know, idle twitching hands to do something.
This isn't going to help you, but to answer your question from before, another big motivating factor is the fact that I came into tech from a place of financial insecurity.
Mm.
And having found financial security, I feel very well. First of all, just getting into it in the first place when I did full stack web development boot camp, and then I got a Kubernetes job, which is nothing the same. And then I was like, oh shit, I need to learn this because I'm actually making real money now. That could be like is giving me secure feelings that I haven't had in a long time. And I do not want to lose this. And so that's where the habits were born from that. And I don't think like that at all anymore. But I think it's worth saying that that's how all the habits started. Was
Yeah,
I'm gonna
yeah,
hold on, the determination to hold on to the good fortune of getting the job that I got right out of boot
yeah.
camp.
I mean, that's probably also good
And
motivation for like getting out of a rut. If in the tech world, you see
yeah,
this all the time where people just they they haven't been paying attention for a while. Paying attention is a little of a pejorative way of putting it. They haven't had, for whatever reason, they haven't been learning new things and how to
yeah.
apply them.
And the financial insecurity had me staying in romantic relationships that were bad and I shouldn't have been in. And so having the freedom of being out of those was felt really good and something I wanted to protect too. Again, not problems that occur at Whitney's life, but that's and I did want to say you're kind of being maybe unkind to yourself or saying like you had by you're not allowed able to form habits or whatnot. But I think that you have a set of kids. You have a bunch of little creatures to take
Mm,
care of, and I think those
yes.
are amazing, but also probably really hard to form habits around.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. That was a good piece of advice once when you're here in Amsterdam, and I was complaining about stuff like that, and you're like, "Cote, you have 3 kids. You don't have time to do anything." Well, you
For
didn't
real.
say anything, but yes. No, that's good too. I mean, and then that gets back to the prioritizing things. This is like that old thing that old now, the cliche thing that like the modern existential problems are that you haven't answered all your emails. It's nothing about like real
You can't
real
find enough
issues.
food. Yeah. Uh-huh.
Exactly. So a little bit back to the tech stuff. So you used this word earlier, which it's kind of one of those words that if you've been working in programming or even operation stuff, you don't really ever think about anymore. But like, what does abstracted mean, or to have an abstraction? Like when you say that word, what do you mean by it?
Um, an abstraction is it's basically a way to chunk like a very complex problem into a solution that you hopefully don't have to consider anymore when you're moving forward with whatever solution you're working on.
Huh.
So,
Right.
so you're like, we talked to, well, like physical machines into virtual machines. Like a virtual machine now is an abstraction that you can have a virtual machine as a node, but you don't have to. You're thinking about you're treating it as if it's the same thing because it's an abstraction. You don't have to worry about the complexities that are happening on that physical infrastructure layer.
Oh yeah.
And then on top of that, like Kubernetes is now like the Kubernetes deployment process and like install process is now something that's an abstraction, like abstracted away in that you can have the user experience of like pressing a button and someone else has thought about all the technical details that need to happen and in what order to make that Kubernetes cluster exist for you with bare minimum thought from you. And so that's been abstracted away.
Right.
And now we're working on the platform engineering layer where we're trying to abstract away the complexity of using individual tools for our developers. So our developers can say, I just want a CI/CD pipeline and our company-wide, our org-approved CI/CD pipeline. And then you have an abstracted experience without having to understand the details of what that is exactly. I just want to build an image and have it go through whatever tests it needs to go through. And yeah.
I like that because it wraps up a couple of concepts in true abstraction format. Is that one, you're simplifying the use of something, but also implicit in that is you're doing a lot of work with the mess underneath it, right? So
all the complex details are still there, but someone's figured out how to automate them, or maybe someone else is caring about them actively, but they're not your problem.
And I guess it also there's a certain amount of like you haven't lost fidelity in that simplification. Like you still can do most or if not all of the things. It's just easier to do them. You're not like you don't have a as one would say a dumbed down way of doing it. It's as smart as the other layers, just easier to use.
Yeah. In the platform engineering example, like maybe you as a platform engineer, you have a way to give your developers control over making their own Kubernetes cluster, but you still might expose some of the details to them. You might say, how many nodes do you want? How big are the nodes? You might say, what Kubernetes version do you want deployed? So they still have some choices, but they're not worried about security groups or VPCs or networking stuff that I don't understand. There's so much they don't have to care about, and that's what the abstraction helps with.
I don't think anyone really understands networking. I think they just feel like they do. There's like seven layers to it. Who can comprehend 7 layers?
When you talk about what I learned in like coming from outside of tech to inside of tech, the first thing I thought was like, oh my God, everyone knows so much more than me. Like, how am I ever going to catch up? I'm 15 years, 20 years behind. And then as I learned more and more and more, I'm like, wait a minute. I don't think anyone actually knows anything. Like,
exactly.
I think they're just throwing jargon around.
Yeah. We're just skating by on thin abstractions, right?
Yeah, wrapping your gaps in knowledge and terminology that no one's going to ask you about. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Well, yeah. So I saw a picture of you, I think from your in a band days where you were playing an accordion, or were you just holding it?
Oh yeah. So I was playing it, but yeah.
Do you know how to play accordion?
Not really. That was a European tour.
Of course, so there's an accordion.
More like there was something hard about bringing the keyboard overseas or being able to set it up, and so like I would just play an accordion. Right. So I didn't actually use like there there's like the keyboard part, and I
Uh-huh.
know my way around a keyboard, but then there are like the buttons that play the different chords, and I didn't know those button parts. So I would just play single notes and then use the air and the bellows. So I
Okay.
got good at the air part and the keyboard notes part, but not I never used the chords, I don't think, if memory serves.
Is there a name for, I don't know anything about playing instruments or music or anything like that, but is there a name for that? Like, so with an accordion, there's three dimensions you can play on: keys, squeezing it, and the buttons, right? And
Yeah.
with a guitar,
Does squeezing it count if you can't do it alone? If you only squoze with no other things.
well, that's a good. I mean, I guess there's a default sound. Like if you pick up a harmonica and you just blow through it, like there's a default thing. So I don't
Yeah.
know. Does
Is
an
there a
accordion,
default
if you just
accordion
squeeze
sound?
it and don't
I
touch anything?
actually I think there might be. Yeah.
Yeah. Or,
Okay.
or or like I guess the maximal version of this is like with a drum set, you could have like 8 different things, right?
Uh-huh.
And so like I would imagine there's a concept of like how many things you can do at once with an instrument. Like with a drum, you've got four appendages, not counting your mouth. And in theory, those could each be operating independently,
And
right?
they
Like if
do. Yeah, yeah.
right. And so like is there a name for that? Like this is a quad instrument or something?
No, but I don't think it's about the instrument as much as it's about human appendage limitation.
Well,
So
sure,
I
sure.
think it feels like piano you could be using all 10 fingers and a foot. And
Right? See, then there's another
that's
one,
probably
right?
a maximum.
Where,
I
whereas like the only instrument I've really ever played, of course, being an American, is a recorder in like second or third grade. And that seems
Yeah.
like that's basically two things that you're doing. You're blowing and moving your fingers to cover the
Mhm.
holes, right? So you've got two. But and then a guitar is like two, I think. Like you put your hand somewhere on the strings to hold them down. I don't even know what it's called. And then you're strumming, right? I mean, every now and then you can like hit the
Well,
guitar, but like
I
I
think that your fingers are sometimes considered independently. Like in drums, you're
oh
using your
yeah.
whole hands for things. And
Uh-huh.
then I think you need to consider each finger independently in
Okay.
this scenario.
That can make
I mean,
or
I don't think there is a thing to answer your question.
okay. Huh.
but, but yeah.
That's
And then you could, yeah.
that's always a bad habit. Well, not a bad habit. It's a delightful habit to overanalyze things. To say like, what do you call this thing that doesn't have a name? That's yeah, that's enjoyable.
I like it. I feel like you're bringing an engineering mindset out into the regular world
So
and seeing what happens.
so now okay. You got your tech world, and then
Hmm.
and then there was the wedding photography. Well,
Hmm.
there was the restauranteering, uh,
Yeah.
and then there was some band stuff. Like
Some man stuff.
like
Yep.
like like what happened before all of that? Was there something before the photography era? Because you and I are pretty close in age, and if
Yeah.
and if I do the LinkedIning, like
Uh-huh.
you started your photography thing in like 2003. Is that like right out of college, or like what? Is there anything missing from your CV?
I had 15 minutes of fame as a fine artist. I had some gallery representation and
Oh,
my art was in some books,
yeah.
that sort of thing. Yeah. But that's all I want to say about that.
Oh, we finally found something you don't want to talk about. Well, that's good. We'll put that over there.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right. Well, the last question. I think this kind of question is always fun, which is so now that you've done like uh, developer advocate relations, evangelism, whatever, like you've done it for several years now.
I
Like,
suppose so.
yeah, like what are things that people don't really understand or get wrong about it? That like, especially if they're kind of like managing it or integrating it into a larger company, right? Like what are some things that you think people don't understand about it very much?
What I think people don't understand is they think you have to make resources around what you're an expert in.
Mm,
And you do not have to be an expert. You just have to be willing to learn. So you don't make resources about what you know, you make resources about what you're curious about, and then you learn it to make the resource. That's what I do anyway. Maybe other people are different. And I have the same, if you, the listener, or you, Kote, ever think about doing a CFP, that's always my number one advice to anyone who wants to submit to speak at a conference is don't submit what you know, submit what you're curious about.
Yeah, that makes sense. That's advice I remember people giving a long time ago. Is the best way to learn something is to speak about it at a conference, or
Yeah.
rather to be scheduled to speak about it at a conference, because then
Well, and
force yourself.
yeah, and if you coming with your amount of knowledge, whatever that is, if you find yourself curious about it and you ask all the questions you want to ask, you end up making a resource that a lot of people can relate to. That's
Right.
something. Yeah, when I was been going through this, so I went through all the security tools, and as part of that, I learned about all the service meshes and like the different aspects of securing pod to pod communication. But when I did enlightening episodes with each of the service mesh technologies, every one of them said, not only do we do security, but we do networking and we do observability. And so then when I started learning about all the observability tools in the CNCF, nobody was talking about service mesh. I was like, but service mesh told me they do observability. Nobody in observability cares about service mesh. Like, what's this disconnect? And then that ended up being a show, like I made an enlightening show about it. And it ended up being a very popular show because it's a question that a lot of people had.
What? So you mentioned security there. Like
Mm-hmm.
you've done a lot of work on that in the Kubernetes space, and security stuff in general, or you've encountered it. Like, why don't we just have this problem solved? Like, it seems like every year, it's like security is like a big crisis, and it's always busting down, and it's always annoying. And then, you've probably read up. There's all these different competing projects and things like
Yeah.
like as an example from something I remember you talking about when I was watching a few things. Like, you shouldn't store passwords in base 64 encoding. Like,
Uh-huh.
why does this still happen? You've created 5 new products on the CNCF landscape by doing that. I mean, that's just a very small, silly example, but what is it about the nature of security that, like, it's never solved? Like, it always seems to be like a bleeding wound on computers.
Well, there are always people out in the world who are going to ensure that it's never solved because they're always trying to find the way into a system, and they'll reap huge rewards for doing that, and therefore will put tons and tons and tons of resources to go for it, and therefore you need lots of resources to fight against it. So that's one thing. And another thing is, it's not like there's so many dimensions of security. There's so many places where you can get it wrong. So there's like you said, base 64 encoding Kubernetes secrets and stored in etcd. Like, you need a level of encryption there. Like, you need to have a secrets manager that rotates secrets, that has permissions when secrets leak. But then you also need to think about policy management. You need policies at the cluster level. You need policies at the kernel level. You need policies at the pod level. You need to secure your pod-to-pod communication. So that has to do with policies around what pods can talk to each other. That also has to do with encrypting connections between the pods, and providing identity for those pods and ways for them to verify each other's identity. Then there's like scanning and signing container images and verifying container images, everything around that. You need to make sure you have your configuration set in just the right way. You need to think about authenticating to a system, and then you need to think about what humans have access to what processes has access to what. It's just that security is like one word, but it encompasses so many different things.
Right. Yeah,
And then
I'm trying to think.
every one of those things is constantly being exploited.
Yeah, I'm trying
Yeah.
to think of an analogy, but I guess it's kind of like, does this work? It's almost like saying, electricity is always a problem. Like it fits into all these things, and that's a little too expensive. But you're right. It's like, if you have a lot of parts, they all need to be secure, and
Yeah.
then even if they don't need to be secure, when those parts talk to each other, that has to be secure. right? Like, and then it just gets complicated really fast, like how you're managing that.
And that's where you get to this idea of zero trust, where the idea is nothing can do anything unless it has express permission. Like you start from zero and then build out, as opposed to traditionally you start with green light to anything and everything, and
Right,
then
right, right. And then you probably
put the
have
gates in.
like a prime mover problem where you're like, well, there has to be at least one password. Like who, where does the first password get entered? And like you've got to figure out how that happens,
Yep. Mm-hmm.
which is fraught with all sorts of things. Well, so many more questions, but we can wrap
What?
it up here.
Yeah. One thing I like about us is we could talk for hours easily.
I think maybe we'll come back with an episode about business travel. That's always fun to talk about. And now, it's always good to swap. I learn something new when I talk with frequent business travelers all the time about what to do here and there. Like I remember years ago, I learned about packing cubes. Life changing. It was great. Do you use packing cubes in your personal travel life now, or just?
Oh yeah. And
I
duplicate sets of things, so I just have to throw the toiletry
There
kit
you
in.
go.
I'm not trying to parse it from my everyday stuff.
We've got the basics. We should do
Yeah.
an O'Reilly video course, business traveling 101.
Take the hangers they give you that have clips to hold pants and actually use them to clip your curtains closed
Whoa!
so that no
See?
light gets in. when you're trying to recover from jet lag.
That would be great to set up the camera and walk into a hotel room and be like, "Hi, welcome to Module 4, the hotel room, day 1."
Yeah.
I like that. Well, we should explain what we're doing here. This is the first episode of we've been trying to do a podcast forever, for several years, and then I don't know. I don't remember why we finally started doing it, but we settled on let's have an interview show where we interview people, and here you are, interview number 1. Good job.
Did I pass? Do I get to be a co-host? Are you gonna let me? It was an audition this whole time.
Yeah. Who's auditioning who? I'm gonna go review the questions.
Another note needs to be passed. Like, do you want a co-host? Yes or no? Check one. Right. Yes. So we're gonna make a podcast together, Cote. You and me.
That's right. How do you normally introduce your new concepts to your audience? What would you say?
Oh, I don't know. This is what I wanted. So I've only been in tech for a few years, and I made some clouds for the IBM cloud, some videos, Lightboard videos for the IBM Cloud YouTube channel. I was able to leverage that into a job on a team with Cote, and I had a mentor at the time named Rick. Hello, Rick, if you're listening. And Rick, I didn't understand that this team I got onto at VMware, this advocacy team, was kind of a big deal. I just had no concept. I didn't know what I didn't know about tech yet. And so I applied for this team. I amazingly got the job. They got me a Lightboard studio. And I told my mentor about it, and we were looking at the page of who my coworkers were going to be, all the advocates. And my mentor back in 2000, what was it? I don't know. Just my mentor, Rick, he was like, "Oh my God, Cote's on your team? You're going to be on a team with Cote." And that's when I knew I'd made it. And now here we are. I actually, once we said we were going to make this podcast together, I was very quick to tell Rick about it. So
well, that's sweet. Yeah, he's a good guy. But I think we both made it. You've done a lot of you do an amazing, not only an amazing amount, but the work is good too. I was watching the first episode of the what do you call it? Choose your own thing. I should know, but like it was there was it was it had this great moment, and you weren't even doing it, but it's like almost a hallmark of Whitney goofballism, where if you remember, that episode was on build packs, and I don't know if you still do this, but you give people like, I don't know, 3 or 4 minutes to go over what they're doing, and our coworker Cora was doing it, and all of a sudden her time ran out, and she was like, "What? Oh no, what happened?" And it was just like this good laugh that the two of you had about how short it was, and everything was fine. It was, I don't know. There's something about that is, it's, the word disarming is weird, but you're always very pleasant in how you go about things and create a little podcast world, a little context that things can work in. So that'll be fun. That was kind of an odd comment, but it's the first thing that
Thanks.
popped into my head.
I like people to feel safe and heard and appreciated, even when I'm cutting them off because they went over time.
Exactly. That's right. Yeah. Well, yeah. So I don't think we've got any confirmed guests yet, but we have a list of people we'll talk to, and I think that's the other thing that'll be good is I think between the two of us, we don't know just all the same people, and we can come at them. That's the wrong way of putting it. We can badger them. We can find out about them from different perspectives, which will be fun. Now to close out, usually I ask people to tell me where people should go for more, but I realized you don't have a website.
No,
isn't that a little weird?
Yeah, it's on my list, my very long list.
I feel like at this point, maybe that's your thing, is like, I don't have a website.
I can't slow down from making the content to talk about the content I already made.
There you go. Put that on the website.
That's genuinely how it feels, which is, it's a nice problem.
Yeah.
I like to direct people to my YouTube channel, Wickedy Whitney on YouTube, and then you can see a list of conference talks that are all fun and silly, and then I have playlists of enlightening, and you choose. And I believe this will live as video in addition to living in the podcast space.
Yeah. I think we'll post it on the Software Defined Talk channel. Just
cool, and I'll link to it on my YouTube page.
As Whitney and I were saying when we were doing this, we're gonna have the video, so why not post it? I think we both have that mentality of like, if this is content, we should ship it. Even
I've learned this thing that really shaped my career, and it's called the Babel hypothesis. Have you heard it?
I don't think so. No.
So this is one of my credos. It's people choose their leader not based on what they say, but based on how much they talk.
Oh, yes.
So, and also just knowing there's like so much content, even though this video will technically live forever, the idea that someone's really going to watch it a year from now is unlikely. And if you do, you know what? That's great.
We'll find out the true thing.
Say hi, comment. Year from now, people, leave a comment.
That's right. All right. Well, great. Well, I think we're going to try to put this out every 2 weeks or so. Which I think will be good. And if anyone has suggestions of people to interview, I mean, I think we'll see how our co-interviewing style evolves over time. But I think it'll be good stuff. And yeah, I'm excited. I think I've also been waiting to do a project or something with you, and I think this format will work out well because there's always a lot to learn from talking with you, and I don't know, you're also just enjoyable to talk with. So
thank you. I feel the same about you. Yeah. Awesome.
Yeah, we could have our mutual admiration society. It'll be great.
Beautiful.
Now, just as a little surprise, I'm going to tack on at the end here. You can do a compare and contrast if you've listened this far. I also asked the Google Notebook ML to do a talking head podcast about Whitney, and I think it's about 8 minutes or so they're much more concise. But until next time.
They got one thing deeply wrong. Can I just point that out? Because
yes.
Everything else is more or less right, except that they say that I do a lot of preparation to get ready for an enlightening episode, and I do not. I do zero. I go in absolutely empty-headed on purpose. So take that, ML. You're wrong.
And I think I saw some of the unedited footage of you talking with our with Oren where you're doing this, and it's true. You have
you know nothing.
You have what do they call it? Beginner's mind.
Beginner's mind. Yeah.
No.
You don't know is staggering.
as more mutual admiration. I think that's something I try to relearn from you a lot. It's just like go in there and ask questions and don't worry about showing off or whatever.
Yeah.
The more nervous you are, the less you're going to learn. Which I should
Make
go
content about what you're curious about, not what you know.
exactly. And then I guess I should have mentioned this at some other point. But so we're going to put this in the software defined interviews feed. So if you've been listening to this and you're like, "Whoa, what happened?" That's because thankfully you subscribed all this time since last time we did it. But you should subscribe to that and recommend it to other people. And we'll see everyone next time.
Awesome. Can't wait.
All right. Let me end the recording. We'll still be here.